I'm glad to say that we have members of the cast and crew with us today. Please welcome first the film's sound designer, Johnnie Burn. Also, the producer of the film, James Wilson. We have the two lead actors as well, Christian Friedel and Sandra Hüller. And, of course, please welcome Jonathan Glazer. Thank you. Thanks to all of you for being here. There's, I think, a lot to talk about with this film. I'm going to do my best in 20 minutes. It's very clear, I think, that a lot of thought and a lot of research went into the making of this film. And I would just love to hear from you, Jonathan, about how you arrived at the approach. I think when it comes to historical atrocity, certainly when it comes to the Holocaust, these questions of what is and isn't, what is showable and what isn't showable, you know, they weigh heavily on any project. And it's the kind of film where I think every formal decision is also an ethical one.
Yes, thank you. I'll try and gather my thoughts.
Yeah.
Forgive me. It's because the process of coming to those decisions is a long one, and sure. You know, you cogitate for a long time on all of the options. And alongside my interest in the subject, long-standing interest in the subject, there was also obviously a considerable sort of apprehension about actually taking it on. Mm-hmm. And so alongside a lot of early reading and research and everything that came with that was, you know, I read quite a lot about the ethics of representation. Mm-hmm. And, but I think for me, the reenactment of atrocity was something which I wanted very, very desperately to avoid. So I didn't want to. For me, it didn't feel like I could do that, or that for me that it should be done. So I arrived at this place where the soundscape, the kind of well, going back a step actually, visiting the camps for the first time, and then visiting actually the Hoss house and garden that you see in the film, which is a very accurate simulation of the Hoss villa and the garden, and the proximity to the camps is as you see it. And the wall that abuts the camp is also the garden wall, as you've seen, which was one of the starkest images I've ever seen. And I think that wall was the thing that started my journey of how to approach the film, and understanding then that we had to stay on this side of it, and in order to look at our similarities with the perpetrators. But nonetheless, the victims, the prisoners were always, they were out of sight in the film for sure, but they were certainly never out of mind. Yeah.
The film shares its title with Martin Amos's book, but it's quite different from the book, even though I think I'm wondering what was it about the book that sparked something for you? I mean, what did you take from it?
The perpetrator perspective, the point of view, or the perpetrator. The Martin Amos wrote the book, obviously, which was a sort of you know, a deeply absorbing book for me, but it was also it led me to the same kind of source texts, primary texts that Martin Amos would have obviously read himself, and in that I became you know, fascinated by the real family, and so the book was very much a kind of a kernel, a sort of quite a, you know, there was something courageous, I think, in the kind of way that he took that on, and yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the production? You built this house, and I think there's something that I don't think I've really quite seen before in terms of how the interior scenes in this film have a particular quality of documentary or surveillance, and I think that has to do with how the house was built and also how you shot everything. So I'm just curious to hear from a production standpoint and also from the point of view of the actors what it was like to work in this way.
Well, the house that we shot the film in that you see was a house that was standing, but we renovated. It was a derelict house, and it was actually about 80 yards from the real Haus Villa, exactly the same orientation. So we shot it there. And the garden that you see and everything was all built by my brilliant production designer, Chris Hoddy, from scratch, which are based on, all of the kind of fragments of research that we found. So where we pieced together, it was very much a sort of archaeological dig for us in order to try and recreate that as closely as and accurately as we could. Decision to shoot it the way we did really came from partly the fact that I was trying to, I wanted to make a film, but I didn't want to use the trappings or tropes of film, not tropes, but it's very easy to glamorize, by cinema glamorizes it, can fetishize it. Certainly empowers the people who we're pointing our cameras at, and it was very important to me not to do that. So I was trying to find a way of filming them without using those tools. So there was no film lighting at all used. There was no cameras. None of the cameras were operated in the house. They were all either hidden or exposed, but not operated. Microphones were positioned around the house. So as Sandra and Chris, I'm sure, will talk about, it was trying to create a reality for them, and then for us to actually retreat. So we retreated from it. So we'd block the scene, we'd work out where the cameras went each and every day. But the real time that's captured in each of those scenes could only be done through that because of the methods that we used.
So, Sandra and Christian, I was wondering if you could talk a bit about what it was like to inhabit that reality.
Well, it's unlike anything that I've ever experienced before, where the setup gave us a lot of freedom in the acting, and at the same time a lot of responsibility, because only we could decide what we do in this house. Of course, we talked about it, but the characters or the bodies that were there had to decide if they move or not, and what pace they move. If they, all these things were kind of our decision, because we didn't cut the takes in between. It was always a very long period of time, of 10 minutes, I think, that the takes were lasting. And at the same time, the sense of surveillance also did something to us. So if you want to call it guilt, the guilt that happened, that is in that room and in that story and in these people was absolutely, we could absolutely feel that. Unless the characters put that aside, of course, they don't feel so much, I think. And I enjoyed very much playing with Christian, obviously, and one of the strange things that happen is when you know that the camera is rolling all the time and you don't know what they are filming actually, what part of your body, or if it's a wide shot, or all these things. You have the same focus all of the time. It doesn't change because the camera is not turning around. So this sort of focus that everybody had at the same moment was very interesting to me, and I enjoyed that very much.
I enjoyed it too, because it's a luxury situation to have all the time in the world to create the situations, to create the characters, to find the truth. And I would like to describe the shoot like a search. We are searching for normality or for banality sometimes. And sometimes we shoot scenes simultaneously. For example, the scene with Rudolf and the Töpf guys who described the new chimney, and next in the room was sitting Sandra with the girlfriends, and sometimes you hear your colleagues at the same time, and did you shoot the scene simultaneously, and you felt the reality we are searching for. and without technical interruptions or something. And even in the scenes we shot outside, there were cameras hidden in the ambush, and I had a lot of riding scenes. I really enjoyed to be in the nature and sometimes to feel it's real now. And yeah, that was a really great experience.
Jonathan mentioned a certain, initial apprehension about approaching the subject. I'm wondering if you did as well as actors about approaching these characters.
My English is limited. What was the word again? Sorry.
Apprehension.
Apprehension? What is apprehension? Sorry.
Nervousness.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I was full of fear, and it never really left me, I have to say, because the topic, the sujet that we were talking about is very, I don't even find the word for that. It's very, how do you say that? Delicate. It's, you can make all sorts of mistakes. There are all sorts of traps in there. And also, we as actors, of course, tend to have certain, maybe consciously or unconsciously, methods that maybe don't work at that moment. So we have to find something else and really serve the project in a way. And the idea of showing this banality of life and the connection that it has with us without being empathetic with the characters. So it was, as you can tell, it was a really complicated thing to do. Yeah, and this fear never went away. And even now, when we show the film to an audience, it feels like it could be read in several ways, and some people maybe don't understand what we do. So, yeah.
Christian?
Yeah, for me, this experience, I'm still processing to shake it out of my body and my mind, this character, because it was a long time. Almost 2 years and 2 Christmas with this beautiful haircut, and but for me it was intense in a way. Sometimes the situation are normal, but there's something under the surface. And Jonathan said to me one key sentence to create this character: if you speak the truth, then lie with your eyes, and if your eyes speak the truth, then lie with your mouth. And to keep all these thoughts inside of me. And that was a really intense cocktail for me in a time with this historical context, with the responsibility towards the victims, with the method, the shooting method. So, and I was really happy to have Sandra at my side as a colleague. We had some of the phone calls after the shooting days because sometimes we were unsure what we are doing here. Is it right? Is it wrong? We had a lot of discussions, and we had a lot of conversations with Jonathan before the shooting, and this was the most important thing. We talked about the characters, the script, all these things, and yeah, it was really intense.
James, maybe we can bring you into this as well, and I'm curious if you and Jonathan want to say a bit about the decision to shoot really at the site and why that was important and what challenges that might have posed.
I think it was always a given. I think it was almost never even questioned that we would shoot the film in Poland, where it happened. I think that's the kind of film like you are anyway. You would go to wherever the story is set, the piece is set, you go and do it there. There was an exploration of different parts of Poland to possibly shoot it in. We had this idea of you spoke to it, building the house and the garden, and we did explore. But actually, we started when John went out to visit in the years. Many years before we shot it, 5, 6, 7 years, visiting the real Hoss house that is there that John described, and spending a lot of time at the museum and the memorial, Auschwitz, and in the town. And then we traveled around Poland, and then I think we kind of fairly fluidly came to the realization that it did have to be there for all sorts of reasons, to feel it and in some way to photograph it and to feel it. And we didn't really even know what that would be. Certainly when you go there, that proximity is what really strikes you. That walk from the garden gate to the SS command building is less than a minute and a half. So it was a given, really. It wasn't a debate. It sort of had to be there. The challenges of that, again, it was a very organic process because we spent so long visiting and going back and forth and working with the people at the museum who were so generous and welcoming and to us. And so we were able to be there. And then I suppose the challenges were the very practical ones, again, that John has spoken to, of making that house. I suppose the house and the garden, making it, the time needed to do that, to shoot one summer, the summer of 2021, and Chris Oddy's his amazing work and his amazing team. I think it took about I think he did it in 4 months. He grew that garden from a scrappy heathland and the walls and the plants and everything, and he wanted longer. So that was a real practical challenge to work out how to do that, to construct the house, and then of course the camera system. So, but we just went for it and did it, and just followed John's vision for that. But yeah, I think those were the main things.
And Johnny, of course, I want to bring you into this. I don't know if people are aware, but this is Johnny's second film at the festival. He was also here last weekend for Poor Things, so thanks for being
busy.
Back. As busy as Sandra at this festival. But, Jonathan's already alluded to the importance of the soundscape and the sound design in this film. I wonder if both of you can talk about just conceptualizing and building it.
Yeah, I think, well, obviously I've worked with John for many years, many decades, and we've developed a workflow, notably on the last film, that some of you may be too young to remember, Under the Skin. But it really about understanding that to have truly immersive audio in film, you need to, it's not so much about crazy surround sound, it's about having credibility in the sound that you do use. So obviously research was where I began on the film, read the script, and we realized that we had to understand absolutely everything about what sounds you would have heard in that time period and how you would have heard them, the physicality, and that's from everything to do with the kind of nature of the place and through, the planes and automobiles that would have been around at the time, but of course the machine of the camp, the sounds that would come from the workshop, and of course the crematoria and the guards and the prisoners themselves, and that involved a lot of research of reading witness testimony and understanding the things that happened there, and going through a process of building a large library to have a plethora of sound that we could use, and the workflow was very much to we sort of divided it into film 1 and film 2. Film 1 being the film that you see, and we had a very formal approach to pretty much completing that before we wanted to get to the point of saying, right, this is everything that we know and this is everything that we see, and now let's add the sound from over the wall, basically. And which was right, because I think film 2 shouldn't inform film 1 if film 1 is to be ignoring film 2. So yeah, we went through a process of attenuating quite how much sound we needed, and it took many months, right? How was your experience of that?
We did work for a long time, of course, and when Johnny and I first talked about the project, and I came to see you, and I sort of introduced the idea to you. We talked, obviously, that probably a few months later, Johnny sort of, Johnny did his own research, of course, and produced a sort of document of what we needed to record, which was about the same length as my screenplay, and about as expensive.
At least, yeah.
And but that's how he started. In other words, Johnny's had an equally rigorous approach to it, and then really it's about gathering sounds. Johnny's sound team field recordings. A lot of what you hear there are field recordings. So we think what might we hear, and then where do we go and how do we go and record that? Where might that be? So it's all based on layers of very carefully calibrated real sound, draft after draft after draft after draft, just like the edit. It's a kind of, until we found the form.
Absolutely, yeah.
Could you give us some examples of what you recorded and how?
Yeah, for sure. We would obviously plenty of nature sounds from around the world, but we've if you need the sound of people shouting, it's better to go and find where that happens naturally than to have people in a sound booth and do it. So yeah, we would go and find sources of men shouting at night, maybe in towns late at night, and over a period of a year and a half, we just built up a library of sounds that were appropriate for
the sounds are categorized just like the edit. Every frame we'd look at, and every sound that Johnny recorded, we'd also listen to. So we'd have, it really was this as he describes, a sort of the film you see and the film you hear.
I mean, sorry.
It is a very important decision for us as actors too, that all this soundscape that is very important for the film really wasn't there. Although Jonathan is somebody who's working in a very transparent way, so he told us what would be added in the end, which I'm very thankful for, because also this can go otherwise. So it was easier for us to put it aside. Yeah.
But I'm curious about, you mentioned like how you thought about just the ethics of representation, and I think sound is also a form of representation, and I'm just wondering how you approach that, because clearly a lot of thought went into how to use sound with and against image in this film. Well,
I mean, what Johnny's caution here, and mine too, is not to kind of unpick the weave of that by sort of telling you exactly what is what. So in that sense, it's what you hear, what you feel from what you hear. Sound is interpretive, of course, in a way that images aren't. So a lot of what you hear, a lot of the pictures that what you hear, the pictures in your mind are created by what you hear. So again, the idea of not showing and not representing in images, but to hear and to feel through what you hear, based on the images that we all know from archive and documentary and even feature films, fiction films of the same subject. I think they're in one's mind when one sees this film, to the point that perhaps you might feel like you have seen those images, you have seen images of violence, but in fact you've only seen those in your mind.
We did find an interesting phenomena that I think spoke to that somewhat, that when we played the film through from the beginning, when we were near the end of mixing it, it would work very well and everything was as we wanted it. But if we came in one morning and started from, say, 30 minutes in, it would all sound wrong and everything was too loud, and we actually thought there was like a technical fault and there was something wrong with it. So which sort of spoke to the idea that perhaps we were dialing things out as well. So I think that.
We only have time for one more question, so I'm just going to ask you to speak about something that I think is really important to the film. I think it's crystallized in the ending of the film, but even before that, through how the film is shot and performed and everything, it feels very much like it doesn't have the trappings of a historical period piece. It feels very much like it's unfolding in the present tense. And that it's interesting. I think the question of proximity is like such a big part of this film, the proximity of the camp and the house, and also proximity of time seems to be like something you're really working with here.
There was, there's been obviously hundreds of films made about this subject, and some better than others, of course, but I'm sorry, I've completely lost my train of thought.
Just time.
Sorry, give me a quick, because it was a present tense. Present tense, so sorry. Present tense is the present tense of the film. Everything had to serve that, really. I didn't want to make a museum piece. I didn't feel like I didn't want to make a film where we felt this kind of safe distance from these events. In other words, if we watch a film which is clearly about an event in history, this particular event in history, we can walk away from it feeling like, well, that's not us. We have no similarities with those perpetrators. And I could never do that, I could never be that, and I remained safe, at a safe distance from it. And we really wanted to upend that with this film. And so everything here is there in the service of that idea of our similarities to the perpetrators rather than our similarities with the victims. And so the lenses, the choices, the sharpness of the film, the vividness of it, and its intent is very much to feel that there is no distance. It's between now and then. There's no difference between now and then.
Well, it's an incredible achievement, and congratulations, and thank you to all of you. Thank you.